Hi, welcome to Cappuccino, the channel where all T's are silent and all bullshit is welcome because I desperately need content to talk about. Anyway, Spotify. Most of you probably already use it or even a subscriber to it. Has become very popular and has taken the music industry by storm. Despite its popularity, though, you'll find that some artists forego it or outright boycott it, such as Garth Brooks, Jay-Z, Tool, Tom York, Beyonce, Dr. Dre, or even Taylor Swift have pulled some of their content or even all of it from Spotify. With this kind of information, you think that maybe there's a problem with Spotify, or is there? That's what I'll cover in this video. A quick look into what may be happening with Spotify that has artists pulling out of their platform. First off, how much do artists make from their platform? From what I've read, it's hard to get a definite figure as to what they make, since a lot of it is contract based. They could, if they have 100% control over all their content, they publish it themselves. That gives them the highest average payment they can. But from there, if they relinquish some of their rights to publishing platforms, if they have more than one person under the label, or just different reasons, the contract could be different for each artist. One interesting thing I found was this article, where they had their data visualized through something called Information is Beautiful, which is a data visualization software. So they used this Google spreadsheet with all the information on here. I have not gone through the sources that they cite in order to prove the numbers that are shown, but I thought it would be a good basic representation to reference the difference between platforms. So if we look here, again, the numbers don't really matter as much, just a basic visual representation. They refer to this as minimum wage. I don't like this representation because minimum wage isn't a clear defined amount. But if we just look at the difference in circle sizes here, we can determine that with the difference between self-distributed album CDs all the way down to using platforms like iTunes, Amazon, Google Play, they must sell a lot more in comparison to get the same amount as. So to give an example, let's say this circle was 1 and this is 5, right? So they would need to sell 5 for each 1 that they would get from a CD to get the same amount of money from it. And as we can see here, it's just different platforms, they need to sell even more. iTunes, Deezer, here's Spotify, and then YouTube is ridiculous. It's hilarious how big this absolute unit of a circle is for YouTube. Anyway, so from what we've seen, the per play revenue from Spotify is much less. Hard to say how much less because of lack of information and volatility of information, but does that really affect the artists negatively? Spotify has become really popular, which means that outreach and availability of content has increased tremendously compared to how it used to be in the past. This really benefits smaller artists because it levels the playing field for them to compete against licensed popular artists. One thing that was noticed is with Spotify, there seems to be a decrease in torrenting content. I think that just because Spotify is free slash really cheap, I think the subscription is $10. So pirating music has become almost unnecessary. Well, as necessary as it was to, illegally download music. People still do it, but there is much less of a desire to do so, I think. Another important detail that comes from this is just how popular Spotify actually is. Just because of the sheer numbers of like users and plays, artists get a lot of traction in the music industry from putting their content onto the platform. And because of all these three main reasons, increased outreach to audiences, decreased pirating, sheer number of plays, the decreased per play revenue is actually neutralized. Again, it's hard to define, like, it is hard to have a definite conclusion on this, but it seems that the benefits neutralize the downsides of using Spotify evenly, thanks to mostly the success Spotify has had over the years. If we read here, in terms of revenue, the authors find that, referring to an article that was published, that Spotify is revenue neutral. And if streaming stimulates sales akin to the way radio used to work, that would be promotion for the music, and overall revenue would rise. On the other hand, the per stream rate is low, then streaming would be unsuccessful bundling and would decrease revenue. As it is, the authors find that Spotify's royalty rate, how much the company pays record labels per stream, meets the traditional sales to placement rate, an estimate of one stream's effects on tax sales, in equilibrium. So, essentially, the finding there is that the lower per play revenue is negated by the sheer number of plays that Spotify gets. Considering this, why do some artists not want to use Spotify? The answer to this differs between, some want better royalty rates from Spotify. We go back to this article here. The streaming companies also retain a percentage for themselves, generally 15 to 30%. Some artists want better royalty rates from Spotify. So, which is in their own right if they wanted more money for their content. Some artists have their own platforms, like Dr. Dre with iTunes, or Jay-Z with Tidal, that they want to promote themselves. And then some artists just have an ideal artistic vision for their music, which again is within their own rights to do so. Moral of the story, I think it's not as bad as some artists think. While on the surface the decreased per play revenue seems unfair, the actuality is that the sheer success of Spotify neutralizes any loss of revenue. In fact, considering how successful they have been, streaming services like these are the way of the future. While CDs and vinyls are nice to have, the vast majority of consumption is going to be digital, whether it be pirated or through streaming services like Spotify. I think artists are actually missing out if they don't put their content on streaming services, especially if you're a smaller artist. Therefore, James Keenan, you crazy fuck, you better put Tool shit on Spotify, or so help me God, I'm gonna go over there and fucking